So, fun fact, I'm currently in India. So,
Really?
Hey, what part?
yep,
So,
yep,
so what
I
time
need an
is it?
extra. It's 10 p.m.
Oh, wow.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, my family is far asleep. So yep. I just traveled like last. I actually traveled this week. I was not feeling too well while traveling as well, but I had to be here because it has been like what 2 years since I visited home.
Mhm.
Mm.
So I feel great. I'm having all the good food, so cannot complain.
Hey, and welcome back to the As I Understand It podcast. This is the work-life podcast about careers, adulthood, and the evolving world that we live in. Each episode, we're going to ask 3 questions, 2 relating to the lives and the works of our guests. We'll discuss the facts, give some perspectives, and probably leave with more questions than we came in with. I'm your host, Cameron Geddes.
And I'm your co-host, Graham Nisbet.
And today we bring on our recurring guest, Liv Wood. Happy to have you back on. And we introduce for the first time Devika, is it Chaddha?
Yes, sir.
Wait, nailed it. Great. So before we get started with our topics for today, we'll just say a few words about ourselves, and I'll go first. My name is Cam Geddes. I'm 25. I graduated from Hope College in May of 2021 with degrees in econ and global studies. I work as a retail sales analyst for the Kraft Heinz company. I live in Oak Creek, Wisconsin with Olivia. And in my free time, I like to weightlift and play video games, particularly Marvel Rivals, which I'm trying to get Graham to download.
I have downloaded it. I just have
Yep.
not played it.
All right. Well, we know what we're doing when the podcast wraps today. So, anyways, Graham, you want to go next?
Yeah, my name is Graham Nisbet. I graduated from Wheaton College in 2021 with a bachelor's in psychology. I'm currently working as a counselor in the Rockford region, and in my free time, I enjoy studying Russian.
Thanks, Graham. And then Liv is our recurring guest. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Olivia. I graduated in 2021 from UW Milwaukee with a bachelor's in psychology. I graduated in 2024 with my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and I'm a therapist in Racine, Wisconsin. In my free time, I also like to play video games and cook and try new recipes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a work in progress, but here we are.
Thanks, Olivia. And then finally, Devika, if you want to give them the audience a rundown on yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hi guys, I'm Devika Chaddha. I am from India. I completed my Master's of Science in 2024 from DePaul University, Chicago in Marketing Analytics and Data Science. I'm currently working as a marketing analyst with a company called Kyra Solutions, where we help the public sector with digital transformation and digital solutions. Other than that, in my free time, I love to chat about marketing and just brainstorm about any creative ideas that people have. I'm a big foodie, so if you have any restaurants, you'll probably hear me chatting about it most of the time. So in my free time, I'm usually just exploring, traveling, and just reading a couple books.
Got it. Well, thank you. Very glad to have you on. So,
Mhm.
without further ado, I think we'll get right into our first topic of the day, which is what is it like pursuing a master's degree while also working? Um, Graham, I think you and I are exempt from this because we've not done master's degrees, but Olivia and Devika have. So, I'll give a little background. Sorry, were you gonna say something, Graham?
Yeah, I was gonna say it is on the to-do list. My
Yeah.
job, they will pay for continued education if you stay with the company, so I very much should be doing that. I just have not pulled the trigger and started that process yet.
Yeah, this will be good.
Check
The
check
advice we
back in a
get here will
year.
be helpful. Yeah. Keep you up to date on that. So I've got a background stat here. Uh, Fair warning, I looked up a bunch of articles on this to try to get accurate stats from recent times, and for whatever reason, Google was just not cooperating. So this article is from 2015, and this comes from, I believe, The Atlantic. So, according to a report from Georgetown University's Center on Education and the Workforce, There were around 20 million college students in 2014, up from just 2.4 million in 1949. 7 in 10 students work while they are enrolled, a figure that has remained steady for the past 3 decades. What has increased is the number of hours they work. A quarter of college students are now both full-time workers and full-time students. Many more are working close to full-time. Nearly 40% of undergrad students and 76% of graduate students work at least 30 hours a week, according to the report. Many are older with families to support. Nearly 20% have children. So, and I think those stats have probably gone up a little bit, in my estimation. So, Devika is someone who's done the work and the uh, grad work at the same time. Do you want to give us your perspective?
Yeah, sure. So I totally understand the statistics that you just mentioned, Cameron, because while I was at my program, I think like 70% of my class was working, like doing a full-time job while they were pursuing their masters, and I had a roommate who was doing her full-time MBA. And she had the same stats telling me, like, probably in her class it was like 80% of these students were working as a full-time employee at any other company as well. So to totally understand where those stats are coming from, I personally feel that having that sort of balance is very important, because masters itself kind of teaches, it's like I kind of call it like a crash course that teaches you about time management, because
Mm,
there's like assignments, but then I myself was a working professional during I was pursuing masters. I wasn't working full time though, but I was still working part time and doing my masters. And it was like, it used to be so difficult sometimes, because I have to like complete my work, and then I have to come home, and then like work on the assignments, get the assignments done, rolling, and then I'll probably have a test next day. So it's like everything is going on, and then you have like social commitments, and then being an international student, I had to juggle between like the time zones, because I have to stay connected to
mm,
my family, my friends in India. So there's like a lot of things that you need to manage when you are working as a professional as well as pursuing your masters. But as I mentioned, it's like a crash course that kind of teaches you all about time management, so moving ahead in the time when you are just focusing, and like it kind of gives you the gist of like the real life, how it's going to be when you're actually working like a professional, or you go up in the levels of like your jobs, you become a director, you become a VP, let's say, in the future time. You kind of realize that the practical knowledge you get in your masters while working is kind of like all about what you're gonna achieve like 10 years down the lane. Like that's how, as a 24-year-old right now, that's how I feel, that that's what my masters kind of taught me, that there will be like 10,000 commitments around you, but there are things you need to prioritize. And when I move like 10 years later, I think those are the things that will keep me moving and keep me going, if that makes sense.
mm. Yeah, I think that's good perspective and just the ability to juggle and obviously the added dimension of being from India and like staying in touch with your family. I imagine that's probably hard to add into the routine as well. So, um, Liv, if you want to go next. So Olivia was she was still in her grad program when we started dating. So, I definitely remember a lot of times of her trying to bounce back and forth between Muskego and downtown Milwaukee and all that.
Yeah, I just want to say I totally agree with it being a crash course in time management. I know everybody's program is different. So for mine, I had to do basically a full-time internship as a part of my grad program, which meant Monday through Thursday, in my case, I was working unpaid. Um, I mean, obviously, I think in my program, a lot of people, I would say the same, were older or working full time, which I would imagine is completely horrible having to balance like going to work full time and then after work at like from 5 to 6 or 5 to 7 doing your internship and then on top of that doing assignments and stuff. So for me, Monday through Thursday, I was both at my internship and going to classes, and then Fridays, sometimes Saturdays and Sundays, I was also working part time outside of that. So it was definitely challenging, but I would agree that it kind of gives you those skills and teaches you the bare bones of how to juggle that stuff so that in the future, when you are in a position where you have a higher um, level of responsibility in like a career, I think it really helps teach you that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a uh good rundown of just how difficult it can be to again maintain all of that and really hone your skills at time management and staying on top of a pretty
Mhm.
broad array of responsibilities. So yeah, thanks for that
Mhm.
perspective. Graham, I'm not sure if you have anything to add. I'll just say that it was definitely a transition for me going from undergrad straight to working. I was employed with NPD right out of school, and it was definitely a harsh adjustment just managing to uh, harsh adjustment, staying on top of deadlines and learning how the real world operates, especially because what I did in my econ program was so far removed from what I ended up doing in my day-to-day work, and also just managing, having fewer people forcing you to be accountable, and you have to learn to take accountability yourself and have good organizational skills. It's very difficult when you're so used to the scholastic life where everything is in basically 30 minute, an hour, 2 hour increments, and you have set deadlines, and everything is kind of spoon fed to you as far as when things are due and what the requirements are. And now that's with undergrad. I'd say that grad programs, of course, it's much more about thinking on your feet and using real world scenarios. So uh, that's all I've got on that. Graham, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, with kind of the crash course on time management, how do you handle such things like sleep? Do you get any sleep? How is that?
I can go first there. So I think that's a very subjective question, Graham. Because the question should be, do you want to sleep? Because the answer would be yes. But do I get any sleep? Not really, because I still remember the times when it was like three of us, three of my classmates and me. We're just, because most of the assignments would be group assignments, right? And we're like sitting, the submission is next day, and I'm in no way saying that you should wait until the last moment to submit your assignments. In no way I'm promoting that. But there will be times, because you're working, you're doing your internships, you're working, and then you have to manage your time, but then make sure that assignment is getting submitted on time. So I still remember those nights where we had to pull the all-nighter, and we're because we cannot meet at the same time as well, and we have to get on a call. Like, there are like 3-hour calls going on, just because like we're working, and then those 3-hour calls, it's like the topics getting deviated here and there. Oh, what did you eat? Well, how did your day go? All of those things. And so, I mean, like, at the end of the day, assignment needs to be submitted next day. So there will be times when you have to pull the all-nighter, and you had like a very long day after your job, after your classes. But at the same time, when you see that A grade on the sheet when the
It's
results
all
come,
worth it.
I cannot complain. All the nights, it's all worth it. But as your question, so the answer would be, did you get any good sleep? Not really, but was it worth it? Yes.
Sometimes you gotta forego the Z's so you can get the A's. I get it.
Correct.
I would add too, like it is hard because like Devika said, like you have stuff due tomorrow and you have to stay up all night and make sure it gets done, not just done, but done well so that you make sure you get a good grade on it.
Mhm.
And I guess if I could give advice, it would be get a planner. And when you have a like 20-page paper that's due in like a month or 3 weeks, start on it right away and at least get like a bare bones like draft of it done. And it is hard. Like it is hard. I would just say do your best to plan, get sleep when you can, and take care of yourself. Try to spend time with friends and family in your free time, but definitely try not to procrastinate and get things done so that you're not like scrambling last minute.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lot of just juggling and getting good at juggling. So I think for the sake of time, we'll move to the next question, which will be, what constitutes success in therapy? So I have a stat here from psychiatry.org. It says research shows that most people who receive psychotherapy experience symptom relief and are better able to function in their lives. About 75% of people who enter psychotherapy show some benefit from it. Psychotherapy has been shown to improve emotional and psychological well-being. It is linked to with positive changes in the brain and body. The benefits also include fewer sick days, less disability, fewer medical problems, and increased work satisfaction. Um, so I think with that we can get to how to uh, how to measure success with therapy. And Liv, obviously as a LPC-IT yourself, I think you're probably the logical person to start on this.
Yeah, I'd say two things come to mind for me. One is that success looks different for everybody who comes in, depending on what they want to work on. For example, like somebody's goals could be, I want to feel less anxious, or I want to feel less depressed, or I want to process through some trauma I've had. It could be anything. And obviously, measuring success in that would be different depending on what they want to work on. That being said, one thing that my company really focuses on is making goals measurable so that it's easier later on to measure success as best as we can. And it can be tough at times to do that. Like if a client comes in and they're like, "Well, I just want to feel better." Then it's my job to think of like, "Okay, how do I phrase that in a way so that in 3 months or 4 months we can look back and say, "Okay, how do you know you're better?" So for us, usually we add in number values as much as we can. For example, like if their main goal is to like reduce their anxiety, one of our objectives could be like learn and practice 2 to 3 coping skills for anxiety within the next 3 months. That way, 3 months later, we can look back. Okay, did you learn these 1 or 2 things? Yeah. Okay, great. We've reached our goal. And I think too, it's important for goals to be kind of fluid across time, depending on how long you're in therapy. That way, let's say after 3 months you reach that goal. Okay, do you want to expand on that goal? Do you want to add in a new one? Take it out, swap it out. So that's what I would say. And it can be pretty hard to measure that, but that's where grad school stuff comes in.
Graham, you want to follow up?
Yeah. So for my specific population, it is dealing with substance abuse. So we do things that, like Olivia was saying, like kind of the SMART goals, specific, measurable, attain, time oriented. But the main goal for where I work is sobriety. So staying sober is the name of the game. The way that I would say it's measurable is learning about the nature of addiction and then setting up a support network. What that support network usually looks like is going to 12-step meetings, attaining a sponsor, and then working through the 12 steps. Would be about 50% of what's taught in the course is getting them into that kind of support network. With the population I work at, sobriety is pretty much essentially maintained by having other people. Its recovery is not something that can be done by oneself. It, by its very nature, needs a group of people and others involved. So it's taking individuals who have many times been isolated from others and getting them involved with some sort of support network. With sobriety being the main goal, time spent sober is one way of measuring, but I think it's important to note that that's not the sole way of measuring it. Basically, when we think of substance abuse, we may think of just not using a substance, not drinking alcohol, not doing drugs. But I mean, many people have, for a time, they've abstained from using, but they haven't addressed the nature of the problem, which is the addictive thinking. So where I work at, we work on addressing where the thoughts are coming from, how to recognize the thoughts, how to put in a barrier between having a thought and immediately acting upon it. So that is part of the education side of things. But yeah, those are some of the ways that success might be measured in that kind of therapy setting.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And like you said, even sometimes just like baby steps can cumulatively add up. I'll just add on to that not being not being in the therapy field myself or anything like that, not a ton for me to tack onto this, but I will say I think I've seen this kind of notion that therapists enjoy or like they don't want to ever fully successfully heal someone's trauma because that would like eliminate business. And right, and see it's like on its face it's kind of even ridiculous. And I think people confuse because therapy is a medical field, people conflate that with like pharmacology where you have certain life-saving medicines that you have to take over and over again, right? So it's like it's the conundrum of if you cure that person, they're no longer your customer. Like a patient lost is a customer lost. So people, and that in itself I will say is a separate argument. I don't want to get into the validity of that because it's not within the scope of the question. But I think people conflate that with therapy and they're like, oh well, if a therapist actually solves your problems or teaches you how to solve problems, then they're not going to be able to pay their bills. No, there's in my understanding there's more than enough people who are struggling with trauma or like mental illness that they need solved. There's more than enough clientele for them.
I
They
was
don't need, like, you know what I mean? It just doesn't make
I was
it
going to
doesn't
add,
fly.
that's assuming that people with problems are a scant resource. There are
Yeah,
plenty
Everybody.
of work to be done there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
And I always tell people, like, especially during my internship, I was in a like college counseling setting, and I always told them, like, you not being here is good news for me. Like, if you're feeling good enough not to feel like you would benefit from it, that's a good thing.
yeah,
So,
I think the demand is high enough to offset that impact of solving people's issues permanently. So um,
Mhm.
but anyways, so without further ado, I think we'll get into our final question of the day, which is going to be, what do you think about phones in schools? Like, what's the impact of having phones in schools? So, this is kind of a little bit different type of topic, but I thought it'd be fun open-ended one. So I've got a stat on that, which is heading into the 2024-2025 school year, a growing number of states are implementing or considering statewide bans on cell phones in schools. Many leaders in education and policymakers suggest cell phone bans will help mitigate youth mental health concerns and distractions during academic instruction. The resurgence of cell phone bans follows two advisories from the U.S. Surgeon General on the youth mental health crisis and the harmful impacts of social media use, and recommendations from UNESCO to limit cell phone use in schools across the world. In 2009, 91% of public schools prohibited cell phone use, which fell to 66% in 2015, before rising again to 76% in 2021. Cell phone bans are now being considered at the state level in light of growing student academic and mental health concerns that are associated with excessive use of smartphones. So, quite a lot there. And obviously, all of us now being out of undergrad and graduate school, again, pending Graham and I leaping back into it at some point, bit removed from our day to day. But I think if I want to go first on this topic, I would just say that I think cell phones, of course, like any other tool, have their purpose, and being connected and um, being able to look things up and like do research and having a healthy social paradigm for people to communicate is great. Um, but I think there are definitely are drawbacks, and I think cell phones before a certain age, particularly, is just such a corrosive thing to add into
Mhm.
people's lives. Like if you look at when the iPhone became popular and um, income really rose to a level that everyone could afford a cell phone, which was around 2007 and 2008. You see like uh, depression and social anxiety in students rising to like insane numbers, like literally leaping off the chart, particularly for bullying and like mental health images because like bad body images of yourself because of like social media gaining ground and people really it's even at a young age having access to that and being able to tap into it. I just think those are the sort of problems that nobody really foresaw, particularly because they didn't assume that people in school and such would be. I just don't think they really like understood the impact it would have. And even looking at colleges and stuff too, I think another big problem is people using cell phones to cheat on tests and whatnot. So that's that persists in high school, college, and beyond of people basically circumventing, I think, their own learning by looking up cheat sheets or having people do things for them. And now, obviously, with all these different AI programs out there, I mean, it's like, what's the purpose? In my opinion, I think that's really bad for student learning because you're not actually learning anything if you're just constantly basically like outsourcing your problem solving ability to an algorithm or to again some sort of
Mhm.
like cheat sheet or like other people. So, and you could argue, and the argument that I've heard is that phones and largely speaking these like AI and different softwares they should be accessible because that's the way that the workforce is going. But I also push back on that because I think that um, if a workforce can do all those things by themselves and if they're not really interested in if they if they just wanted more software or they wanted to use AI or whatever, they would just do that. They wouldn't be hiring people. So if they're hiring you, I think there's an expectation that you can solve problems for them. And some of that is just going to come from your innate ability to do things. It's not going to come from you just constantly leapfrogging onto different resources. So there's like the efficiency argument, but I think more broadly, why go to school and why do all these things with learning if you're not really going to be paying attention anyways? So, in the phone element of that is just the largest category of that area. So, anyways, Devika, you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I think for this particular question, I think of it from a very consumer behavior perspective because that's the realm I've been working in past 5 years, and I've seen it change drastically. Like being in the marketing sector itself, all I do is kind of influence people, right? So like past 5 years, things have changed drastically after COVID specifically. I've seen like from all the analytics and things that I've been working on, every company I worked on with, like every company I worked with, we've observed a sudden rise in like people using mobile phones or tablets, and especially the students, like because we rely too much on AI, we rely too much on having like consuming a lot of digital content, be it newspapers, everything became digital after probably 2021. So what I personally feel here is both there are both pros and cons, that every coin has two faces, as we say. The pros definitely would be that we as just humans are moving like really fast towards a very digital age. We talk about AI, we talk about we talk about smart televisions in classrooms. So from my perspective, I've seen a lot of countries, even in India, we have like at the schools, we now allow students phones, but there are like phone free zones where you cannot take your phones, and you got to keep it aside, or you cannot use them so that there's no distraction. But still we have like smarter classrooms, and I know like in my during my time in DePaul, we had smarter classrooms. I think what really plays an important role here is age, that at a certain age you should be allowed phones with you to the colleges, so that you know that what's right, what's wrong. Before a certain age, I think you're not really mature enough to understand what's right for you to consume, because all sort of information is there on the internet and you have the access irrespective of your age. So I think that's the limit that that I would set, but again, it's not in my hands. But just thinking from a consumer perspective, like having phones in schools, as Cameron mentioned, it's a source of distraction, but at the same time you get so much from it because we are moving towards that digital age. So having that sort of balance, that you get, like we get the students to use phones, to use that technology, while, because when you think about the pros, there's a lot of safety concerns out there, so that it's easier for you to communicate. There is always, like, it's always good to carry a phone with you. So a lot of those pros are there, while you state the cons as well. But at the same time, those distractions, as like one point that Cameron mentioned, I really like that. When a company hires you, when somebody hires you, it's all about your knowledge and what you bring to the company, rather than just having that AI knowledge, or like whatever you use to like write your papers or whatever, that I keep seeing, like AI hacks, or all of those chat GPT hacks and stuff. So those things really matter when we like, just as a closing point, what I would mention is like having pros and cons stated well while we are utilizing phone as students is very important, but to maintain a balance. Because we cannot go back to the times where there's no phone in college, we cannot go back there. We keep moving forward towards the digital age. There will come a time where there will be like no books at all. I can already see that happening. So just having that sort of balance, where we're not making, where we're making sure that the phone does not come as a distraction with the student. It rather comes as a, either a utility or just another tool to learn, is what I would look at it as, rather than having it as a source of like, oh, I can get everything from here, I can get everything from the internet. It can be a source of learning, but it cannot be the only source of learning, if that makes sense. So that's how I see that.
Yeah, I agree. Liver Graham, any thoughts before I close out?
I would pretty much agree. Yeah, my mom works in an elementary school, and she talks about all the time, like kids will be caught with their phone on the playground and then it gets taken away and it's a source of distraction. And I will agree that there are like some safety concerns in it. My mom was telling me about how some of their students who are diabetic have some sort of device that is on their person, and then they have an app on their phone that will alert them when their blood sugar is too high or low. So those students obviously need to keep the phone on them at all times. So I think obviously there's caveats to that as far as health and safety concerns, but I agree with the age thing. I think younger kids won't understand like what they should be using it for or when they should be using it or how much. But definitely in college and perhaps some circumstances with older high school students, it could be more helpful than it is harmful.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good point there. Graham, anything else?
Um, mm, I mean, just from my experience with phones in the adult population, um, I, I've done both times of like straight up not allowing any phones and then times of allowing them. I think just from either a counselor or educator's perspective, just working on making lessons engaging, because I've had times when everyone's had access to their phones, but when they're really interested in what's going on, they'll choose not to use them. So
Mhm.
just especially with kids going to school early in the morning, lack of sleep, everything going on, just working on things that can really work towards their interest, because if it's something they like doing, they will genuinely work at it.
A quick point I would like to add there is like, just for the example that Graham mentioned. I remember, I assume like all of us know about Quizlet.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's like the best way to use phones in class, because I used to get, I'm a very competitive person in general, and if like somebody is telling me that, oh, there's gonna be like point system, I know I'm not getting anything out of that. But just the competitive nature. I think that's a really good. I've seen a lot of like younger students getting engaged with Quizlet and all those sorts of like, so making technology as engaging as possible kind of gives the students that responsible, the mindset that I'm using it responsibly. So like teaching them, like telling them not to use technology does not make sense to me. Telling them how to use technology is the right way to go about it. So I think that's something I would like to add.
Yeah, I agree. It's a
Mhm,
good example of using technology responsibly. So
mhm.
that I think will close out the episode. I want to thank Devika and Olivia, obviously, for coming on. Very much appreciate their time. You'll be able to find today's video on YouTube as well as available through Apple Podcasts. There will be some shorts going out on like Instagram and TikTok and YouTube.
TikTok, which is
Yeah,
back.
I was gonna say,
after
Graham and I called that one last, or was it 2 weeks ago, last week?
a whole
Called that one
12 hours.
immediately.
That was
Yeah, a
tough.
whole 12 hours and it got brought back, which is exactly what we called. So, anyways, but yeah, we just want to thank everyone for watching, and you'll be expecting another video out in about 2 weeks. So until then, have a good one and take care.